D.T. Suzuki on the breadth of Mahayana Buddhism. Buddhism, especially Mahayana Buddhism, so-called, is like a vast ocean where all kinds of living beings are allowed to thrive in a most generous manner, almost verging on a chaos. Students who lightly step into it generally find it too complicated and overwhelming for their logical comprehension. But the fact is that Mahayana Buddhism is the outcome of long years of development of a religious system among a people furnished with a most fertile imagination. The student has to be patient. The best method of study may probably be found by taking up one principal Mahayana Sutra at a time and examining its contents historically, philosophically, and psychologically. The Chinese scholars encountered the same difficulties centuries ago, and as in those days there was no lower or higher criticism of the sacred texts, every tradition was respected on its face value. The scholars exhausted their ingenuity to make a logical, humanly plausible arrangement among the vast treasure of literature brought over from India, and all claiming to have been delivered by the Buddha himself. This untenable position is now abandoned, and each sutra has come to be studied historically, critically, and analytically. Each principal sutra may now be regarded as marking a certain stage or phase of development in the history of Mahayana Buddhism, which is indeed too huge and unwieldy to be handled as one solid piece of work completed within a few decades. What, then, does the Lankavatara signify in the composite system of Mahayana Buddhism? What phase does it represent in the long history of Buddhism? What, in short, is the message of the Lankavatara as we have it now? What function does it or did it perform in the conservation of Buddhist thought and experience? Each principal sutra has had its special work to accomplish in the unfoldment of the religious consciousness of the Buddhists. For instance, the Saddharma Pundarika marks the epoch in the history of Buddhism when Sakyamuni ceased to be conceived of as a historical personage subject to the fate of all transient beings. For he is no more a human Buddha, but one who lives through eternity for the benefit of all creatures. All that he is recorded to have done in history is no more than one of his, quote, skillful means, or upaya, to save mankind. So we read, quote, I show the place of extinction. I reveal to all beings a device, or upaya, to educate them, albeit I do not become extinct at the time. And in this very place, that is, Mount Gridrakuta, I continue preaching the Dharma. Here I rule myself as well as all beings. But men of perverted minds in their delusion do not see me standing here. In the opinion that my body is completely extinct, they pay worship in many ways to the relics, but me they see not. They feel, however, a certain aspiration by which their minds become right. When such upright, mild, and gentle creatures leave off their bodies, then I assemble the crowd of disciples and show myself here on the Gridrakuta, and I speak thus to them in this very place. I was not completely extinct at the time. It was but a device of mine, monks. Repeatedly am I born in the world of the living. I see how the creatures are afflicted, but I do not show them my proper being. Let them first have an aspiration to see me. Then I will reveal to them the true Dharma. Close quote. The Suvarna Prabhasa, at least in part, belongs to the same period when it says, quote, Every drop in the oceans may be counted up, but the age of Sakyamuni is altogether beyond calculation. Mount Sumeru may be pulverized, and every particle is countable, but the age of Sakyamuni is altogether beyond calculation. However innumerable, every particle of dust composing the great earth may be counted up, but not the age of the victorious one. However boundless space is, its ends may be reached, but the age of Sakyamuni is altogether beyond calculation. However long one may live through hundreds of kotis of eons, he cannot count up the age of the Buddha. There are two deeds whereby a man's life is prolonged, not to kill others, and to give away much food. For this reason, the age of the great man cannot be measured. It is like the measure of kalpas, which are incalculable. Therefore, harbor not any shadow of doubt as to the age of the victorious one, which is indeed beyond the reach of measurement. Close quote. The Sukhavati Vyuha represents a stage in the history of Buddhist experience which ceases to be wholly satisfied with the intellectual presentation of the doctrine of enlightenment, when Buddhists began to be oppressed with the idea of sin and doubt hanging over them too heavily and acutely. Read the following, in which the destiny of those bodhisattvas is described who have not yet come to have an absolute faith in the wisdom of the Buddha, but who try to save themselves by amassing their own stock of merit. Quote, "And, O Ajita, there might be a dungeon belonging to an anointed Kshatriya king, inlaid entirely with gold and beryl, in which cushions, garlands, wreaths, and strings are fixed, having canopies of different colors and kinds, covered with silk cushions, scattered over with various flowers and blossoms, scented with excellent scents, adorned with arches, courts, windows, pinnacles, fireplaces, and terraces, covered with nets of bells of the 7 kinds of gems, having 4 angels, 4 pillars, 4 doors, 4 stairs. And the son of that king, having been thrown into the dungeon for some misdeed, is there, bound with a chain made of the Jambunada gold. And suppose there is a couch prepared for him, covered with many woolen cloths, spread over with cotton and feather cushions, having kalinga coverings and carpets, together with coverlids, red on both sides, beautiful and charming. There might be brought to him much food and drink, of various kinds, pure and well prepared. What do you think, O Ajita? Would the enjoyment be great for that prince?" Ajita said, "Yes, it would be great, O Bhagavat." The Bhagavat said, "What do you think, O Ajita? Would he even taste it there and notice it, or would he feel any satisfaction from it?" He said, "No, indeed, O Bhagavat. But, on the contrary, when he had been led away by the king and thrown into the dungeon, he would only wish for deliverance from there. He would seek for the nobles, princes, ministers, women, elders, householders, and lords of castles who might deliver him from the dungeon. Moreover, O Bhagavat, there is no pleasure for that prince in that dungeon, nor is he liberated until the king shows him favor." The Bhagavat said, "Thus, O Ajita, it is with those bodhisattvas who, having fallen into doubt, amass a stock of merit, but doubt the knowledge of the Buddha." Close quote. It is very interesting to contrast these passages from the Sukhavati Vyuha with the thought pervading in the Prajnaparamita Sutra. For the Prajnaparamita, dwelling on the conception of unreality or emptiness, or sunyata, seeks deliverance from the dungeon of existence, or rather interprets the Buddhist realization purely from a metaphysical point of view. The doctrine of sunyata, constituting the keynote of the Prajnaparamita, is really the foundation of all Mahayana schools of Buddhism, including even the Yogacara. What is known as primitive Buddhism denied the existence of an ego substance, or Atman, but its conception of the external world was that of the naive realist. The Prajnaparamita philosopher insists on the non-existence of a particular body as such, that is, as an objective reality whose identity is absolute. Every being, or every object, as he sees it, is relative, impermanent, and not worth attachment. This Prajnaparamita idea of unreality or emptiness as the literal sense of the term sunyata is the foundation of the Buddhist theory of nature. Thus, in the Prajnaparamita, supreme enlightenment is identified with the attainment of sunyata. In other words, the object of the Buddhist life is to find an unattached abode in this realization. This abode is called apratisthita, not abiding. Hence, the noted phrase in the Diamond Sutra, na gavatsit pratishthityam sitam utpadiyati avyam. The Tathagata has no dwelling place, in the sense that all his thoughts and doings have no exterior or ulterior objects in view to which he desires to adapt himself, and therefore that he is like the sun that shines on everybody, just and unjust, or like the lily in the field that blooms in its best even when there is nobody around to admire its suprasalamnic array. So we have again in the Ashtasashrika, chapter 2, page 34, quote, a bodhisattva mahasattva should abide himself in the perfection of prajna by abiding in emptiness. The Tathagata is so called because he is not abiding anywhere. His mind has no abode, neither in things created nor in things uncreated, and yet it is not away from them. Close quote. This is the message of all the sutras belonging to the Prajnaparamita class. As to the Avatamsaka Sutra, it is really the consummation of Buddhist thought, Buddhist sentiment, and Buddhist experience. To my mind, no religious literature in the world can ever approach the grandeur of conception, the depths of feeling, and the gigantic scale of composition as attained by this sutra. It is the eternal fountain of life from which no religious mind will turn back athirst, or only partially satisfied. It is a great pity that this magnificent literature still remains concealed in a language not so universally accessible. Here, not only deeply speculative minds find satisfaction, but humble spirits and heavily oppressed hearts, too, will have their burdens lightened. Abstract truths are so concretely, so symbolically represented here that one will finally come to a realization of the truth that even in a particle of dust, the whole universe is seen reflected. Not this visible universe only, but a vast system of universes, conceivable by the highest minds only. Toward the end of this section, I have translated the 10 vows of the Bodhisattva Samantabhadra as given in the final chapter of the Gandhava Yuha, which forms a part of the Chinese Avatamsaka.